Fast fashion is one of the critical industries that has had an impact on our planet. Is the third largest pollutant industry currently.
Do you think that there is a risk that with increased legislation, mandatory reporting, it might halt progress? It might hold companies back from doing new and innovative things around achieving net zero?
We need to understand our risks in a different way. We need to look at materiality in a different way. We need to look at what is our impact, but also what impact the changes in climate have on our business model. How do we adapt to that? And when we come to customers, I think that conversation is something that it's already happening. Customers are a lot more aware.
Manufacturing, logistics, waste management, the carbon emissions of actually just heating buildings, heating, lighting, stores, bars, restaurants, hotels, all of that. For an organisation to get their heads completely around all of those scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, it's quite a lot.
It is definitely a process where you look at every aspect of your business, and first and foremost, you look at efficiencies and where can you find efficiencies. Can you reduce the waste that you're producing? Can you find better energy sources?
Hello and welcome to our Business But Better podcast, brought to you by Irwin Mitchell. I'm Charlotte Rees-John, partner and head of our retail, leisure and hospitality sector at Irwin Mitchell, and I'll be your host today. For anyone watching for the first time, this podcast brings together experts from different parts of the industry, sharing stories to help you inject purpose into your organisation. To do so, I'm joined by two experts. Firstly, I'd like to welcome my colleague, Claire Petricca-Riding, Head of Planning and Environment at Irwin Mitchell. And I'm also delighted to welcome our guest, Jose Arguedas, Head of Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability at River Island. Jose is an accomplished sustainability leader with over 20 years' experience in ESG-related subjects. In that time, he's developed cutting-edge sustainability strategies for fashion retailers across the globe. Welcome both. So, let's set the scene. The UK government set a goal of decarbonising all sectors and achieving net zero by 2050. But have businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure sector responded? What does this look like in practice? And what learnings can major high street brands pass on from their experiences? Jose, let's start from the top. When we say net zero, what do we actually mean? What is the background to it and why is it so important?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question, and sometimes it's hard to explain. But in simple terms, I think that net zero, it's the balance between the greenhouse gases that a business emits versus the gases that are retrieved or eliminated from the atmosphere. As you know, climate change is something that we are all quite aware now. It's a scientific fact that our planet is getting warmer. We feel it in our days now, that we get hotter days in the summer and sometimes colder days in the winter. And it's all that because of the impact that humans have had on our environment. So this describe net zero and why it's important. It's very important for businesses to be accountable for the emissions that they produce, how these are removed from the atmosphere so that we can limit the increase of temperature our planet has to no more than 1.5 degrees, which is what scientists describe as our tipping point for then the planet going into real extreme weather conditions, which could be adverse to populations in many parts of the world, agricultural impact in terms of damage to harvest, flooding, extreme weathers, droughts. So yeah, that's basically why this is very, very important and a topic that needs to be discussed not only at every board but also at every operational area of the business.
Thanks. So really important. I'm taking that message away. But Why would you say that the retail, leisure and hospitality sector are at the forefront of this debate?
Well, it's interesting. I think that all businesses are becoming more aware of, and obviously they're more active in this space because more and more legislation is being introduced. I think the retail sector in particular, which I can speak for, we've been working on social and environmental impacts for quite a long time. This may be driven by the influence of stakeholders, shareholders, customers becoming more aware. And at least for the last 20 years, the industry has learned to innovate, collaborate, more importantly. We still know that fast fashion is one of the critical industries that has had an impact on our planet. Is the third largest pollutant industry currently. So there's still a lot to be done. But I think that the experience and the fact that the industry has been working on this for quite a long time has helped in terms of understanding the challenges, understanding some of the actions that need to be taken. Of course, when we talk about the number of people, the number of businesses that are involved in our industry is a monumental task. Supply chains are quite complex. Most of them are located in parts of the world that have their own particular challenges in terms of access to infrastructure, technology, resources to be able to adapt to a more efficient and more successful environmental practices. So I think that it is still quite a long journey ahead of us to get where we want to go. But I think that, like you said, I don't know if it's being in the forefront, but I think that the experience and the amount of time that we've been working on this, at least I've been working on sustainability for at least 20 years already. So it's definitely something that more and more brands have taken in retails have taken on board as a important part of the business.
So what does net zero mean to River Island? What are the upsides and downsides that customers may see from both in terms of buying and affordability, which you touched on?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So what does net zero means for us is having to rethink our business model. That's a fact. We need to understand our risks in a different way. We need to look at materiality in a different way. We need to look at what is our impact, but also what impact the changes in climate have on our business model. How do we adapt to that? And when we come to customers, I think that conversation is something that it's already happening. Customers are a lot more aware in terms of their own purchasing practices and their own habits and what they want and what they expect. I think that one of the downsides that we definitely do not want the customers to feel is the increase in costs. So we think that it is our duty to make sure that our products are more environmentally friendly without having to pass that cost to customers. We definitely think that it is a responsibility in terms of becoming more efficient, finding ways to innovate better, to look at alternatives in the market that allow us to meet those customer demands and produce better products and go through that exercise without customers really having to, say, well, I need to pay more for a more sustainable product. I think that then it's not really a change in the business model. What we want to is impact and have a conversation more around elements like durability, elements around after use, for example. So at the moment, we have a take-back scheme at River Island where we help customers who no longer want their products. They can bring them back to us, and then we'll repurpose those, whether it's through re-commerce or recycling, upcycling, and all that has an impact on our own footprint and our own emissions. So it is a conversation. I keep saying it's a conversation with customers where we need to really listen to what customers want, and also customers from different generations. And we know that the new generations are a lot more demanding on issues and of products that be more focused on their impact. So we need to have that our ears quite open for that.
Thank you. Claire, if I may come to you now. So what is the government doing to help businesses achieve the 2050 net zero target?
Well, I think it's been a bit hit and miss of late. Last week, we had the High Court once again say that the government isn't doing enough in terms of meeting its obligations under the Climate Change Act 2008. We had Friends of the Earth, Client Earth and the Good Law Project once again bring another challenge against the government's carbon budget policy. When the net zero strategy was announced, they also took them to court, and the High Court again had said previously that the government isn't doing enough. So it has been a bit hit and miss, and I think sometimes that provides a confusing picture for organisations. But as we've heard from Jose, then we really are seeing a picture where private organisations are taking the challenge upon themselves to do the right thing.
And is there any kind of idea of bringing together the different regimes to try and have any consistency, or is that just not happening at the moment?
Not really, no. But equally, I think that we've got the EU Corporate Sustainability Directive that has reporting responsibilities on organisations. That's currently attracting 50,000 companies across the EU and non-EU countries. So obviously, if you have a subsidiary, even if you're a UK company, if you've got a subsidiary that trades in the EU, then you still need to comply with that Sustainability Reporting Directive. That leans into the International Sustainability Standards Board. That's going to come into the UK and into effect either this year or next. But obviously that does show that there is a direction of travel in terms of reporting standards. And that then leads into mandatory reporting standards from an ESG perspective. And obviously we have in the UK the climate-related financial disclosure. That doesn't really affect all organisations, so it is not necessarily a one-size-fits-all. And I think really what we need to do is start filtering these down across the board. So it's not just the larger organisations or a global organisation that they should be hitting upon. I think that to get a level playing field, but also to understand everyone's impact, I think that they do need to start looking at across the wide spectrum of organisations that are in the retail, leisure and hospitality sector. And that is going to be a challenge because, there are SMEs that might find that a challenge. But until we get to that point, I think it's going to be very hard for us to understand what the emissions are from that sector as a whole. And it's a big, broad sector.
One of the common themes that we've seen over this series of podcasts talking about ESG is and I wonder what your views are on this, but with the increase of mandatory reporting and scrutinisation, we've talked about greenwashing, we've talked about equality, diversity and inclusion. Do you think that there is a risk that with increased legislation, mandatory reporting, it might halt progress? It might hold companies back from doing new and innovative things around achieving net zero?
It's a good question. I think the first thing that is posing is a challenge for businesses on the resources that it takes just to meet the requirements in many levels in terms of data gathering. Some of the new requirements are forcing us to look at data that we're not gathering, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But definitely there is a lot of investment that's needed to be able to then meet the requirements in an efficient way and in a meaningful way as well. The requirements themselves, I think that as long as they can create a level playing field for the industry and for everyone in general, I think they're a good thing. It will hold progress, I think, in the way that businesses are going to be required to be more transparent to have substantial evidence to back their claims. I think that one of the things we talk about Green Claims Act and the CMA, what they've done is really look at the greenwashing aspect and claims that are stretch or unsubstantiated. And I think that businesses will need to really look at having enough information to back whatever they're trying to market in their products, and that's a good thing in general. I think that's a good thing. But the other challenge that I see in the increase of all these requirements is that they're not all aligned. So it duplicates in some areas, and in other areas creates challenges that we're really unsure how we are going to be able to challenge and to address. But yeah, I think that it is going to be like this for the next 5-10 years, where I think legislation will become a significant driving force for businesses to incorporate more sustainable practices into their operations. Again, I think that one of the things that was said before is governments need to then back that up with support. I think that we need support in investment on to help us innovate, to help us create new solutions, new processes, new materials. The UK at the moment doesn't have enough investment in areas like recycling, for example. So recycling is quite inconsistent across different areas of the country, and that doesn't really facilitate or enable businesses to be more efficient in finding solutions for things like waste or energy production or repurposing some materials that could actually really have an impact. So it's all those elements that come hand in hand that I think businesses will need to have a quite close look at in the quite near future, as well as like I said before, looking at how do you look at risk and how do you look at your operating model and whether you need to look at incorporating new elements in that.
Yeah, I think it's around that support piece, isn't it? It's how, particularly with SMEs, in order to help businesses to achieve net zero, it does seem that there's a massive burden right now in terms of just keeping up with all the new legislation, what's on the horizon, let alone the actual support they need to be able to comply with any of it. I suppose that brings me quite nicely, Claire, to ask you around what are we doing at IM to support clients in this area? What are you seeing that they need? How can we support? What does that look like?
So from an Irwin Mitchell perspective, we have looked at our own footprint. So there's two things. So one, what are we doing as an organisation ourselves? And two, what does that look like when we're trying to help clients? So from an Irwin Mitchell perspective, we've got our roadmap to net zero. We've got an environmental strategy where we've looked at our emissions from across our operations, across our office base, and also the way that we travel around the country and around the world, etc. So we have our emissions data. We have our science-based targets that are verified and how we report on those. But we also have a commitment to power all our offices by renewable energy means by 2025. And we have an overarching strategy and reduction in our emissions by 2025 as well. So we've been quite clear on what we're trying to do as an organisation. We're one of the early adopters of the Legal Sustainability Alliance. We work with the Chancery Lane project in terms of advice that we provide to clients. And the Chancery Lane project helps organisations, it helps law firms by setting out a suite of precedents that look at environmentally friendly commercial contract clauses, property contract clauses. So we've used our expertise and our experience from our internal strategy to really help shape our net zero offering to clients. Really leaning into, once again, the expertise that we've got in-house. Obviously, we've got a range of environmental and planning lawyers, but we also have internal expertise, and the head of responsible business. We've got our own environment manager that's looking at the science-based targets and how we manage our carbon footprint. So utilising their skill sets and their knowledge and passion for environmental improvement, we're able to help clients on their journey, because we're able to articulate and narrate to clients the really positive story that Irwin Mitchell has had of how it got started. And that's actually a really important message for clients.
How are you coping at River Island with all this increasing legislation and reporting? I mean, obviously they've got you, so that's brilliant. But how are you coping with all of that?
Well, no, it's a team effort. Actually, it's a whole business effort, and like it was said, we're also on our journey to get a better understanding of our own footprint. So we assess our footprint 2-3 years ago, and have science-based targets set, which have been validated. This year, we're reassessing some of those baseline numbers that we had. As we get better and better data, we can understand our footprint a little bit better, and then start to put some targets in place. Things like in the UK, we only use renewable energy for all our stores and our offices. We have zero waste to landfill from our distribution center, for example. So we try to repurpose everything. Our carrier bags, we recycle all our plastic, and it goes to make our carrier bags, and they can be brought back so they can be, again, put into circulation and into the recycling process. We use only UK plastic so that we don't have to import any plastic. There's a number of things that we're looking at, from the materials that make our products, the processes, reducing the amount of water, chemicals, adopting more green chemicals. So it is definitely a process where you look at every aspect of your business, and first and foremost, you look at efficiencies and where can you find efficiencies. Can you reduce the waste that you're producing? Can you find better energy sources? One of the targets that we have is to have our supply chain be coal-free by the end of the decade, which is a huge task because some of the markets that we source from are very dependent on coal, for example. So it is something that without the partnership of our suppliers, we're not going to be able to do. So I think that's the critical component of all of this. Is you need to really work with your business partners, your suppliers, your customers to make collective efforts in reaching those targets and understanding where the limitations are. And that also kind of ties into the support that we need from the government and support that we need from different institutions in terms of making sure that we can have access to the infrastructure and the technology needed to be able to then collectively meet our 2050 target.
So it just seems like quite a huge task, particularly for a smaller organisation, to almost know where to start. So if you were giving any advice to a smaller business, someone listening in today, what areas would you advise them to focus on to concentrate on their net zero journey?
So I think the first thing is understanding your footprint, understanding your impact. Start with the things that are closer to you. So every company needs to know their immediate emissions and the immediate impact that they have, whether it's the energy that they're burning directly or the energy that they're buying and procuring. So try to understand your footprint as much as you can. And then I think it's just the more you can focus on the hot spots and prioritize where is really the impact can be significant. I think that even for small businesses or large businesses, when you look at your overall footprint, it could be daunting if you want to tackle everything. I think that you need to learn to really understand where your hotspots are, how to prioritize the efforts that are going to help you reduce those hotspots. Set realistic targets, even if it's sometimes, uh, you know, feels like you're not pushing yourself. Set realistic targets. I think that that's very important. And then, of course, is just getting the business together. It's just it needs to be a part of the business structure. It needs to be part of. It needs to come from the board of directors. It needs to come from the C-suite. It needs to come from, all the individuals that are heading the organization to fully commit to delivering better improvements in this space.
Claire, would you have anything to add to that? I mean, that sounds like very good advice to me.
It is very good advice. So there's probably not too much more to add other than it's really hard when organisations are the first adopters of a policy or innovation, technology, etc., because there's always a premium to that first adoption. So there's a point about collaboration without breaching the CMA rules, which also then adds a complexity to it. So the CMA are trying to help organisations collaborate more when we are dealing with environmental issues, just to try and get over this first adopter premium. So that could help smaller organisations learn from larger organisations what they have done and what they can usefully use and adopt in their own organisations and operations. I think carbon, net zero, I mean, they're so politically loaded terms at the moment. I think if we start talking about environment positivity or nature positivity, where we're actually saying, well, we're doing this because we want to make a positive impact into the environment or a positive impact into the natural environment or nature, that might then help bring more people into the fold and help more people on their journey. Because, as I say, sometimes it can feel like they are quite politically loaded terms, but also that they're quite dry. Carbon emissions seems quite esoteric sometimes. So I think by focusing on some key aspects of what you're trying to do, set those goals up and work backwards from that, I think does help organisations as well. And I think one of the challenges for the sector is that it's so wide, as Jose already said, in terms of everything that you need to consider, right the way from your supply chain, how you manufacture clothes, or how you manufacture the coat hangers, the plastic bags. That was a really interesting point to note, that you recycle the plastic to then help assist with shopping bags, but the use of single-use plastic across the retail, leisure and hospitality, say for example, even thinking about the little bottles of shampoos that you get in hotels, etc. Manufacturing, logistics, waste management, the carbon emissions of actually just heating buildings, heating, lighting, stores, bars, restaurants, hotels, all of that. For an organisation to get their heads completely around all of those scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, it's quite a lot.
It's really interesting listening to both of you speak. As lawyers, we talk a lot about marginal gains. And I think perhaps that's a good takeaway for businesses, rather than getting confused and lost with the amount of things that can be done. Looking at what they can do, and actually some of the smaller things can make a real difference. So we've talked about what to focus on. I wonder, just to wrap up for today, whether you could give any key messages to any chief operating officers who might be listening in. What could we say to them, and now we've got their ear?
Well, to start, I would say look at your business plan and really understand where you have your biggest hotspots. Look at the opportunities that brings to the business, and rather than looking at as a risk mitigation exercise, perhaps analyze whether there's an opportunity for growth, for developing new markets, for developing new products. And like we always said, really listen to customers, what customers want. Let's look at the market, make sure that we stay relevant. It is very important for businesses to not just look at what the customer demands today or the market is demanding today, but what do we think the market is going to be like in 5-10 years? And are we business ready? Are we future-proofing our business to make sure that we can meet those demands, that our supply chain can meet those demands? So if anything, that's what I would tell. And that's what I tell my CEO. If he was here, he'd probably corroborate that. But it's just looking at what are the opportunities that you have within this space.
Brilliant. Claire, do you have any last messages?
Yeah, I think when we're dealing with such big issues, I think we can get locked up in the perfection argument that we want to do everything to the ultimate perfection. And actually, sometimes that's not where we need to be. And we need to start thinking about pace over perfection and about how we can change little things quickly. And I think if we really bring that into our thought process, then we might start to see some quicker change through that. And pace over perfection is something that we are talking about in different sectors, especially the renewable energy sector and the property sector. How can we bring pace over perfection? Because I think that I think as a nation, we're perfectionists, and I think if we don't have a perfect picture and a perfect route to get there, then we think, it's too hard. So try and refocus that narrative and that story of where you want to get to. I think that would be key, because that's actually when you're going to start to see the change. And don't be afraid to make mistakes along that journey, because I think we all forget that actually the greatest power of learning and being transparent and accountability is where we sometimes make mistakes and we learn from those mistakes. Things that we were talking about 5 years ago, we've completely changed our narratives on this. I've been an environmental lawyer for my whole career, and the things that we're currently talking about, we were not talking about back in 2005. Let me tell you. So I think that's really important to note, that things are coming at us quite quickly. But I think just really making sure that we're doing things at pace, but we're not afraid to make mistakes for the board.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you both. One last thing, last question, if I may, Jose. In our last session, we were lucky enough to be joined by Ebony Kuo, who is lead people partner at JD Sports. And we asked her whether or not she would have a question for you, Jose, and she's left a brilliant question. So her question is, how can a robust ESG strategy benefit equality, diversity and inclusion?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think it's a critical one. It's a really important part of any business ESG strategy and people strategy, to focus on its own people and how do you create that culture where everyone can feel counted, included, seen, appreciated. So there's a lot of elements there. We can go for another, 30 minutes just talking about this topic, and I feel very passionate about equality and diversity, inclusivity, and equity. So definitely, it is a critical consideration in any ESG plan. I think just as we focus on and talk about the impact that we have on the planet and an environment, we need to be equally mindful about the impact that we have on people in our communities, and the impact that we have in communities where our products are being made, and the responsibility as businesses that we have to improve the quality of lives across those areas.
Brilliant answer. Thanks, Jose. And thank you both so much for sharing your expertise with us today. And to you, our listeners, thanks once again for tuning in. That's all from us this season, but we'll be back in a little while with new stories and guests to help you do business, but better. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to be the first to know about our new series. Bye for now.